All right. I'd like to start out by saying Barakatah Yahawah, Ba'ashem Yahawashi, Ba'ashem Rakakodash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is Concerning Our Calendar and Frozen Lamb Dinners. And this is just a title that just came to me. You know, I've been meditating on the calendar. You know, we're coming to the end of the year now, so end of Esau's year. So, you know, getting into the spirit of setting up the calendar, you know, for next year. And just wanted to say a few words, you know, on this situation, because you have those, you know, well, first of all, we have to know how to deal with the calendar itself, with our calendar. We have to understand that our calendar, as we're keeping it within Esau's calendar. So it's not going to line up with Esau's dates. And concerning what a lot of them scoffers out there call frozen lamb dinners, you know, which they call that, you know, for our Passover, because sometimes we may have the Passover February or March, depending on how the new moon falls. You know, they're just scoffers. Bottom line, because if it don't line up with Esau's times, then it ain't valid in their eyes. But what you're looking at right now is a little example of a new moon calendar dating back to 2014. Now, wanted to, you know, they have a whole bunch here from 2014 and 2013, but I wanted to get to one to make the point. Now, when you look at this, it gives you the different phases of the moon. Right, and then it also gives you where the new moon falls. You know, it gives you the new moon dates, you know, when the new moons come in. And in this particular one, I wanted to use this one because the new moon falls where? In the middle of the month. Now, does that mean in the middle of Esau's month? Now, does that mean that the new moon is the middle of the month? No. Esau's time is off. So this is why you'll have the beginning of, or you'll have a new moon fall in the middle of his months. Why? Well, let's go real quick to Psalms 82:5. They know not, neither will they understand. They walk on in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are out of course. So all the foundations of the earth are out of course. That means everything that you see, you know, around you, around us, is all off. This is why fruits don't grow to their full potential. Animals are all messed up. People are all messed up. The air is all polluted. Times are all screwed up. You know, and nothing is lining up like it should. Why? Because everything is out of course. The foundations of the earth are out of course. And the person that's running things is out of course himself. This is why you have a new moon calendar with the month of December 2014, where the new moon falls where? In the middle of the month, which is absolutely ludicrous, because we understand that according to the scriptures, the new moon is the beginning of the month. So when we try to keep our calendar within Esau's calendar, we can't keep it perfect. That's why we have to constantly adjust our calendar, because every year that goes by, there are 11 days added to there are 11 days extra in Esau's calendar than ours. So every 3 years of Esau's time and his calendar, our calendar falls back a whole month. So that's why if we try to keep it succinctly, so to speak, or keep it, you know, concurrently, our calendar is going to fall back so much, because we're keeping our time in Esau's time. So every 3 years we have to adjust the calendar, and from time to time we have to adjust the calendar because we're keeping it inside of Esau's calendar. You see, and you can't calculate our time inside Esau's time. It doesn't work that way. That's why our month, new moon, begins at the beginning of the month. Here has a calendar where the beginning of the month starts here, right, with the 1st of December, but the new moon falls where? In the middle of the month, or almost in about the third week of the month, which is totally off. All right, because the foundations of the earth are out of course. Jeremiah 10:1. Hear ye the word which the Lord speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. Because the message of salvation, the message of the scriptures, the message of the truth is to the nation of Israel, no one else. Salaki for a minute. So there's messages to the Israelites, the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians, and wherever Israel is scattered around the world. Thus saith the Lord YAHAWAH. This is what the Most High is saying. Learn not the way of the heathen. So don't learn the way of these nations. So this calendar that Esau has is a calendar of the heathens. And when you go back to the origins of this particular calendar, it goes back to the Julian calendar. And prior to this particular calendar that we have today, which is called the Gregorian calendar, after Pope Gregory, you had the Julian calendar, but you also had another Roman calendar that consisted of 8 days. If you type that online, the Roman calendar had 8 days at one time. So there's no way to accurately pinpoint time and what year we actually really in. The only thing that we have to go by in the scriptures is what? The new moon. And this is why, we have, and this is why, when you try to compare our calendar with Esau's calendar, it's not going to match up. This is why in December of 2014, the new moon fell where? In the middle of the month on the Esau's calendar, but it's supposed to be the beginning of the month. Why is that? Because the foundations of the earth are out of course. That's why the Lord said, don't not to learn the way of the heathen. Going on, Daniel 7:25, and he shall speak great words against the Most High. That's what Esau always does. And shall wear out the saints of the Most High. And that's what they're doing. And that's what they've done. And think to change times and laws. And they've changed times. That's why you have the everything is all backwards. And they've also changed laws, because you have a set of laws in the scriptures, a set of law in the scriptures, but these devils don't follow it. They change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until the time and times and the dividing of times, because there's a certain period of time where this devil is going to have the earth, and eventually it's going to be taken away from him, given to Yahawashi, and back into the hands of Yahawashi and the Israelites. All right. So the man that's in control of this earth has everything out of course. Everything is not lining up properly. Isaiah 24:5, the earth also is defiled under the inhabitants thereof. And the inhabitants of the earth today are following the guidelines of Esau, because Esau is the one that's running things on the earth. So if you want to be be accepted in this society, you have to do things according to Esau. So as the earth also is defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws. They have transgressed the laws, broken the laws, changed the ordinance, broken the everlasting covenant. So it shouldn't be a strange thing, or it shouldn't be a surprise if the time of the calendar is off. And this is why you have these individuals that claim that we have a frozen lamb dinner, which we're going to get into that. I just found a pack of frozen lamb shanks. This is what they say we have in a frozen lamb dinner, because we keep our Passover sometimes in February, sometimes in March. It depends on how the moons fall. All right. So now going to the next scripture, Job 17 and 12. They change the night into darkness. The light is short because of darkness. Why? Because they have changed the times. They have transgressed the laws of the Lord. They have changed the times, moved the times. This is why they're constantly moving the time either up or down. There was certain instances where there was a certain number of days during the 1600s, I believe, that were taken out completely out of the calendar. Then you have these individuals that say that the Sabbath is Saturday night to Sunday night. Friday night to Saturday night. But how do you know that that's been something that's been consecutive all the way back from the time when we kept it? Kept the Sabbath, because we didn't have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, none of that. We had the first day of the month, the first day of the week. The second day of the week, so on and so forth. So that Monday, Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday didn't come to be until the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire's calendar had 8 days at the beginning. Then they had to adjust that to 7 days. So how could you have kept a unbroken Sabbath from back then, going back to when the Sabbath was kept? The only possible explanation for that would be what the scriptures say, that the moon, that the month is called after the moon, and the new moon is the beginning of the month, and that's where you start to count for everything. And this is why you had you had mainly Issachar and other tribes that would watch for the moon phases, to know when the new moon was coming in, to know when certain high holy days were coming in, so on and so forth. All right, so now let's get into this. This is a blank calendar, right? This is the month and the days of the week. We had 7-day week because we know that, we had 7 days week because in the beginning, the Lord said he created the earth in 6 days, and the 7th day he rested. But we know that Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, these are not the names of the months. You see, this is the names of the months of the Romans, which they're still keeping today in America. So this is okay. That's just, let's see if they don't have any. Here we go. This is a blank one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and that's it. And we didn't keep the calendar this way in most cases. It was just kept by the phases of the moon, and people would keep track of the phases of the moon. And then that's how they would know when the Sabbath was coming in. So then we have the term calendar, a chart or series of pages showing the days, weeks, and months of a particular year or giving particular seasonal information. Why? Because you had the high holy days that were established upon what? Upon the phases of the moon. This is why, let's go to Genesis 1 and 14. And the power said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for what? For signs and for seasons and for days and years. So how do you know when one day starts? As soon as the sun goes down and you see see it get dark, that's at sunset. That's when a day begins. That's what when we read throughout the scriptures, it says here, verse 19, and the evening and the morning were the 4th day. So the evening dictates the beginning of a day, just like the new moon dictates the beginning of the month. And there are 4 weeks in a month. You see, it's very easy. So now let's move from there to Ecclesiasticus 43 and 5. Great is the Lord that made it, and at his commandment runneth hastily. He made the moon also to serve in her season for a declaration of times. Because from the moon is how you calculate time. Because it says, in the evening and the morning were the first day. So when the sun sets, that's the beginning. The beginning of a day starts at sunset. So the moon is what dictates, the calculation for our days, for our months, weeks, years. It says, and a sign of the world, because there are also signs that it was used for, because when we read Genesis, it said that it was for signs and for seasons and for days and years. So the moon and the sun and the stars and all, they served a particular purpose. But we know that the moon is what establishes the beginning of the month, as we're going to read. From the moon is a sign of feasts, see? Because you have, when you go back, let's go to Psalms 81, and let's go straight to the point. 3, blow up the trumpet in the new moon and the time appointed on our solemn feast days. Because when you check out those major high holy days, they all fall around the new moon. Salaki, not the new moon. They all fall around the middle of the month, which is the full moon. But the new moon is the beginning of the month. And when you go back to Leviticus 23, I hope I'm not losing anybody. When you go back to Leviticus 23, it shows you that in the middle of the month, that's when a lot of those high holy days were kept. So if I'm losing anybody, let me know. I'll go back and explain it. He made the moon also to serve in her season for a declaration of times and a sign of the world. From the moon is a sign of feasts, a light that decreaseth in her perfection. Why? Because when the feast came in, when did the feast come in? in the middle of the month. 2 weeks, usually about 2 weeks after the new moon. And it said what? When the new moon, when the full moon was in, the light decreased, because that was the height of the moon, the second week of the month. Then from there it started to decrease, because what's happening? The moon is starting to wane and starting to go down to become the so-called dark moon, as they call it, or the new moon, to make room for the new moon coming in, or the next month coming in. Because the word Chadash in the Hebrew means new moon, or new, which is the new month. It says, from the moon is a sign of feast, a light that decreaseth in her perfection. The month is called after her name. That's where you got the word month and moon, which are synonymous one with the other. You know? It says, right, that's right. Like Prince Yeshaya said, further proof that the new moon is the beginning of the Sabbath. And that's true, because the new moon is a Sabbath. Let's go to Amos chapter 8 and verse 5, saying, when will the new moon be gone? So this is those wicked men that had substance, that they made money by selling. It's saying, when will the new moon be gone, that we may sell corn? So why would they want the new moon to be gone so that they can sell corn? Because on the Sabbath, you can't sell corn. You weren't able to sell anything. You weren't able to buy anything, if you want to get technical. So they wanted the new moon to be gone so that they could sell corn. Why? Because the new moon was an actual Sabbath. And then you had Sabbaths that followed after that. And the Sabbath that we may set forth wheat, making the ephah small and the shekel great, and falsifying the balances by deceit. Because they were ripping people off, but they knew they couldn't rip people off on the Sabbath or on the new moon, which is a Sabbath. Okay, the other one is, let's go to Ezekiel real quick, 46 and 3. Likewise, likewise the people of the land shall worship at the door of the gates before the Lord in the Sabbaths and in the new moons. Where is the point at? Let's start at the first verse. Thus saith the Lord power, the gate of the inner court that looketh toward the east shall be shut the 6 working days. So whenever there are working days, this gate will be shut. But on the Sabbath it shall be open. Why? Because it's a Sabbath. And in the day of the new moon it shall be open, because you couldn't work on that new moon. It was a Sabbath. So that's why this gate was open on Sabbaths. All right, verse 3. Likewise the people of the land shall worship at the door of this gate before the Lord in the Sabbaths and in the new moons. Bottom line, it's plain. So going back to Amos 8 and 5, saying, when will the new moon be gone, that we may sell corn, and the Sabbath that we may set forth wheat? Because you couldn't sell on those particular days. So where were we at? Let's go back here. It says, go straight to the 8th verse. The month is called after her name, increasing wonderfully in her changing. So the month is called after her name. Why? Because the new moon is coming in. And when the new moon comes in, it's so-called dark. That's why they have here, for the new moon is completely dark. You have the full moon, which is completely lit. And this would be the middle of the month. And this would be around the time of the feast days, which we're going to show you that in Leviticus. Then, as each day went by after that, you see the moon slowly waning and slowly turning into a so-called dark moon. You see, and it slowly but surely starts to go down until it's completely so-called dark, which is not really dark. It's just that the light is not as bright. But that's just making way for the new moon. You see? And then from this point, that's when it will start to increase. That's where you see the first slivers of the moon, so on and so forth, And that's what would set forth the count for the beginning of the month, the beginning of the weeks and all that, the beginning of the months, years. So it says from the moon, the month is called after her name, increasing wonderfully in her changing, because that's when it starts to increase from the new moon. Being an instrument of the armies above, shining in the firmament of heaven. Let's go from there to Psalms Oh, we already read this, but let's read it again. Blow up the trumpet in the new moon, in the time appointed on our solemn feast days, because the new moon would usher in what? The beginning of the month. And then from that point on, that's when you would be able to gauge when the high holy days were coming in. This is why in Leviticus 23, let's just go to the point. Leviticus 23 and 4. These are the feasts of the Lord, even holy convocations which you shall proclaim in their seasons. In the 14th day of the first month at even, so the 14th day in the evening is what? The beginning of the 15th day is the Lord's Passover. So now if we go back to this calendar here, you have the new moon. Let's see if we could find one that's closer to the beginning of the month. Okay, you got that one, the third, the second, the first. Here we go. The new moon, right? So when the new moon came in, they would blow the trumpet announcing the beginning of the month. Then 2 weeks later, which would be the 14th day, this would be the first day, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So the full moon will fall around this time period here. So the 14th at evening, which would be the 15th, that would be roughly around the time of the full moon. But you see how it didn't really line up there with this? Because Esau's calendars are off. You know? So pretty much around that time period is when the and then in this month, check this out, in this month, January, you had 2 new moons, which we know that that's not the case. It's just that Esau's time is off. You see? But normally, you know, the middle of the month would be when the moon was at its fullest. And that was a sign for the feast. That's why it says in the 14th day of the first month at even is the Lord's Passover. And on the 15th day of the same month, which is the same day, it says is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So the Passover is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. But the Passover is that night. And the Feast of Unleavened Bread, that's another name for it. But the Passover was that night because that's the night when the Lord passed over the Israelites and slayed all the firstborn of the Egyptians. All right? And on the Passover, we couldn't eat unleavened. We couldn't eat leaven. So another name for the Passover was the Feast of Unleavened Bread. But that night of the 14th, that evening, which was the beginning of the feast, that was the actual Passover when that happened. And from that point on, we couldn't eat leaven for those 7 days. And on the 15th day of the same month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread unto the Lord. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. See? And then when you go to the, let's see if we could find the other one. Just bear with me 1 second. Excuse me. I'm trying to get to the, okay, you had the Feast of Salake. You had the Memorial of Blowing of the Trumpets. You had the Day of Atonement. And once again, when you come down here, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, the 15th day of this 7th month shall be the Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days unto the Lord. So that's another feast that would fall on what? On the full moon, around the time of the full moon, which was the middle of the month. You see? But then when you look at Esau's calendar, you know, it varies. Because here you got the full moon at the beginning of the month and the new moon in the middle of the month. This is madness. Then when you go back up here, it gives it to you a little clearer because you have the new moon at the beginning of the month. Where is it? Right here, at the beginning of the month, and the full moon around the middle of the month. You see? So this is why, you know, we can't keep our calendar perfectly under Esau. And this is why you have a lot of guys that say that we keep a frozen lamb dinner for the Passover. All right? And I just looked this up. Like, this is the 33rd parallel, and I'm not concerned with the significance of the 33rd parallel. I'm just saying that Esau has a graph on the world, geography, the graph of the earth, and they have certain lines that go across that parallel with other parts of the world. Now, this is the 33rd parallel, right? And between that and around the 31st parallel, this is where you have Jerusalem. All right, because here you have the 33rd parallel again, right? And then down here you have Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is between like the 31st and 32nd. All right, because it's the 31st, 32nd, 33rd. So it's between the 31st and 32nd. Now, when you go, this is just, some, like just little tidbit. When you come to the so-called United States, the 33rd parallel goes across these southern states here: California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, between Arkansas and Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina. But really, it should be further down here somewhere, including Florida. Now, I looked up, just for the hell of it, which the first brothers I saw do this was the brothers in Dallas. What is the temperature in South Carolina, which is one of the states in line with that. What is the temperature of South Carolina in February? And it's in the 60s in February. And when you go to Jerusalem, right, in the month of February, what do you see? Mid to upper 50s, and some cases in the 60s. But we are where? We're up here, which is colder, than it is down south. So I mean, however way you slice it, it still cuts their BS, because they say ice cold lamb dinners. Yeah, but if you up here, of course it's going to be so-called ice cold. But if you down here, it's a little warmer. And if they want to go even further than that, we'll go to Genesis. I'm sorry, Genesis. I got Genesis on the brain. John 18:28. Then led they Yahawashi from Caiaphas unto the hall of judgment, right? And it was early. It was early in the morning, and they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might what? Eat the Passover. So this is around the time of the Passover, right? Now let's go up to the 18th verse. It says, and the servants and officers stood there. These are the ones that brought Yahawashi to Pontius Pilate, who had made a fire of coals. Now, why did they have to make a fire of coals? For it was cold. Because in early spring, when spring first comes in, it's still cold outside. So for these guys that call it, you guys, keeping a frozen lamb dinner. Well, so did they keep were they keeping a frozen lamb dinner on the Passover? Because it was cold. It was cold enough for them to have to make a fire to warm themselves. It says, and they warmed themselves, and Peter stood with them and warmed himself. So this happened where? During the time of the Passover. It says, the high priest then asked Yahawashi of his disciples and of his doctrine. Yahawashi answered him, I spake openly to the world. I ever taught in the synagogue and in the temple, whither the Jews always resort. And in secret have I said nothing. Why askest thou me? Ask them which heard me, what I have said unto them. Behold, they know what I said. Now let's jump to the point right down here. This is during the interrogation of Yahawashi. And Simon Peter stood and warmed himself. Why? Because it was cold. So if you want to get technical, according to what y'all saying, Yahawashi and the disciples kept the ice cold lamb dinner, because they kept the Passover the night before this. You see? And Simon Peter stood and warmed himself. They therefore said unto him, art not thou also one of his disciples? He denied it and said, I am not. But the point is, and the servants and officers stood there. This is during the Passover, around the time of the Passover, who had made a fire of coals, for it was cold. It was cold. For you guys that accuse us of keeping the Passover as a ice cold lamb dinner. And the word cold, sukkos. Cold. You see? And it wasn't cold where you could just put on a long sleeve shirt or something like that. It was cold to where they had to actually burn a fire to be able to keep warm. So it wasn't just some, it's just a little chilly out here. Let me put on a sweatshirt, or let me put on a long sleeve shirt and I'll be okay. They had to actually make a fire. And pretty much, if you really want to get technical at the end of the day, I'll leave you with this scripture, Colossians 2 and 6, 16? Yep. Let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in respect of an holy day or of the new moon or of the Sabbath days. Why? Which are a shadow of things to come, but the body is of Yahawashi. So this what we're doing is a shadow of things to come, because in the kingdom we'll be able to keep it perfect. Because right now we can't keep it perfect, because everything is out of course. 1 Corinthians 13:9. For we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away with. But the thing that is in part now, we have 100% of it. But when the kingdom is established, we'll be able to keep it perfect. So that was just something I had wanted to go into concerning, as the title is, concerning our calendar and frozen lamb dinners. I mean, there's a whole lot more that could be said about it, but that's just, just a point, to bring it out, that every time I heard that term frozen lamb dinner, the Spirit kept tapping me in my mind about how Peter had to warm himself, and they actually had to make a fire. It wasn't like they were just, rubbing their arms and, rubbing some of the chill off. No, they actually had to start a fire to keep warm. So with that, I pray that your brothers have been edified. I have another lesson that I want to go into, Lord's will, see how the Spirit goes. Probably name it a part 3. Esau can't get it right or something like that. I'm trying to remember the name of this. I wasn't trying to make it a series, but the Spirit got me making it a series. Esau can't get it right. So I have something else, another video that was sent to me, that I was watching. I watched the whole thing. It was about almost 47 minutes long. And pretty much Esau was getting down, as far as, the information he was bringing out was concerned. But the problem is that Esau, when it comes time to getting into the scriptures, they're completely gone. They don't have a clue of the scriptures at all, because it wasn't given to them. So the best thing for Esau to do is just to stick to the information and leave the scriptures alone. So with that, I pray that your brothers have been edified. Shalom to the Akim on the comment boards and some of the Aquaf that showed up. The water for all the comments. Salak, if I didn't get to anybody, if anybody asked questions, if I didn't get to the questions, But pretty much, once the kingdom is established, we'll be able to have everything perfect, because then perfection will be set up, and then we'll be able to keep everything perfect, because we'll be changed, and the law, statutes, and commandments will be put into our inward parts. So with that, I say shalom.